Good morning from Worcestershire Hill, where we are on our way to Kidderminster for the Severn Valley Railway for their Railway 200 trains through the ages. Just changing trains here on the way up towards Kidderminster.
We are now approaching Kidderminster. Please mind the gap when leaving the train and step onto the platform before removing heavy luggage and pushchairs.
The Severn Valley Railway terminates at its own station, separate from that used by National Rail Services. However, the two are quite literally right next door to one another, making for an easy transfer from one to the other. After seeing the auto train, I had just 15 minutes before the next departure. This was due to be the Severn Valley Railway's LMS maroon carriages, pulled by Stanier Mogul number 13268. However, the steam loco unfortunately failed on the morning of the gala, and as a result, diesel locomotive number 50033 was drafted in to pull the train for the day. So I've just taken 2 trains up all the way to the current northern terminus of the line at Hampton Loade. I say current northern terminus because the line normally runs up to Bridgenorth, but at the time of recording, the section between Hampton Loade and Bridgenorth is closed due to the collapse of an embankment earlier this year, which is nearly the works for that are nearly completed, so the line is very close to reopening later this month. In fact, kind of sad, but be that as it may, it highlights, I think, the critical sort of work that I'm trying to do in visiting all these heritage lines and shine the spotlight on the role that they play in preserving our heritage. Because, this is the UK, and I think a lot of people have chipped in to help support the railway in very difficult times. What about railways across the globe that don't have that kind of support? At any rate, as you can see, I've jumped off the train here rather than going back towards Kidderminster. I decided to just take a nice little walk along the length of the line. There is the footpath of the Severn Valley Railway, which runs sort of alongside both the railway and the River Severn, which offers some great views of the trains passing. And that's quite nice because it's nice and easily accessible from the railway, which, if you're not driving, is a big plus. It means that we can take a walk and find some views of the trains that are not at stations and feel a bit more historic, which is kind of why I do a lot of this as well. Is I go for the historical photography, and that can be quite challenging at a station when you've got a lot of people around. So there we go. We'll take a little walk and see what we can see. So the path does indeed run quite nicely along the line here. Although the timetable is quite intensive, it's not so intensive up here between Arley and Hampton Loade, as indeed can be seen by the fact that I had to change trains. It was the first one I got on. Just backing into a branch. First one I got on was only ended at Arley. So that one, the one I did get up to Hampton Loade, just left. I didn't quite get to see it leaving. I've got plenty of footage of it the other side though, mind you, so I'm not complaining. There is supposed to be a diesel, a Western, on its way up here, which is supposed to get here at 12:10, but they've been running on a bit of a late timetable today, so again, ducking a little bit. All points out, as of this point in time, there have been some concerns about the future of this path, and that has been reflected in the maintenance, that simply being that the fact that the land is actually owned by the railway, and they have leased it out to the local council to use as a cycle track. But of course the local council have got financial difficulties. The railway don't exactly have the wherewithal to keep all of this up, so they are looking for people to look after this stretch of route, and in the meantime they're obviously trying to keep it open, but they just don't have the wherewithal to really keep it maintained. I have to say I was sort of half expecting it to be in worse condition than I might have originally, worse condition than this. It's pretty passable, really. After a fairly lengthy trek from Hampton Loade down to Arley, I rejoined the railway services, boarding the train back to Kidderminster, where I was booked to see the National Railway's travelling Railway 200 exhibition, Inspiration. A look through the National Railway Museum's Railway 200 exhibition train, Inspiration, clearly intended more for families, encouraging young children to consider railway-related professions as a career. Next, back to Bewdley to hopefully capture some more off-station footage. Absolutely beautiful historical scene, but if only I'd spotted that those branches would be completely in my way before I'd stopped to film there.
No urgency anywhere. Because they won't allow anything rather than 200 a lot when it's working. Well, I would say well, I'll tell you what, I've been listening to it for a long time. Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I heard people on the train, I want to come in again. No urgency. And that's for dragging the set to service and then shoving it back in. Should I put that steel on? Yeah. Get two coating in. Well, the entrance to Kidderminster.
So I'm just stood here on the footbridge over the railway lines here at Kidderminster after making my way back to start my journey this morning on the Severn Valley Railway. Most of the locos and rolling stock have returned back to base. We're just expecting the last train. I was half expecting it to be here any minute really. Given that the whole timetable has been running pretty much an hour late, which is unfortunate, but hey ho, what can you do? So it's going to be in a pretty darn late return, which is a bit of a pain, but anyway, what can you do? So yes, we'll see the last train in, and then we'll make our own way home back home.